There's Just Something About Kansas City is brought to you in part by the generosity of our friends at the Cockrell Family Foundation, the Bergman family, and the Sherman Family Foundation. Thank you.
Hey everyone, welcome once again to another episode of There's Just Something About Kansas City. Don't forget to like, listen, subscribe. You can get on any platform and just tell all your friends and neighbors about it. And don't forget, we're on YouTube as well, so you can check us out. In fact, both Deliece Hofen and I had to get dressed up today. And Deliece is my guest today. And for those who don't know, and I think virtually everybody in the Kansas City Metro probably knows who you are by now and the wonderful work you're doing with Braden's Hope for Childhood Cancer. Deliece, just thank you so much for coming in today. And you're going to share your story and things are, how are things?
Well, thanks for having me. And things are good. Things are good right now. So we knock on wood when we say that, but things are good.
Yeah. And you have some events coming up, right?
We do.
All right. And if you'd like to go, we'll talk about those. And then we'll get back into the history of, exactly the Braden's Hope and how you found it and about Braden, who is still, he's going to be 21 years old this year, which is a miracle. And you are a cancer survivor as well. The story is just absolutely incredible.
Thank you. Well, we do have several things coming up. And one of the great things about Braden's Hope is we have a lot of community events. And so our first one that we have is coming up during the month of March. It goes the whole month long. Jersey Mike's is doing a fundraiser for us. They do this nationwide. And so they give 15% of all sales each Monday in March to Braden's Hope. From all of the local stores here in the metro area, St. Joe, Topeka, Lawrence. So 15 different stores are going to be doing this for Braden's Hope. Nationwide, the whole chain does it. Oh, wow. But locally, we have 15 stores that are participating with Braden's Hope, so we're really honored for that. Then the big day of giving is on March 26th, and it's an amazing event. So they literally give away 100% of everything that they bring in to each one of those stores to a charity. So 15 of the stores are going to be donating 100% to Braden's Hope. And last year, I think we made over $150,000 from people coming in and buying one sub at a time, which was incredible. They don't take out for their labor, for their food costs, nothing. They legitimately give 100%, which is pretty cool of their corporate to do that.
Yeah. So every one of my cheesesteaks that I get at Jersey Mike's, you get 15%. That's a pretty good deal.
Absolutely. You should have cheesesteaks for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Listen, I have done that. When I go back to visit Philadelphia, is where it's part of where I grew. I didn't grow up there, but I went to college there and worked there for another 5 years after school. When I go back to visit, when either the Chiefs go back and I had to cover them or whatever, I'd have a cheesesteak, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So it's crazy. So I love cheesesteaks.
Yeah, they are really good.
Yeah, they are really good.
Cheesesteaks in Philly is like barbecue in Kansas City.
Exactly.
Where when you ask somebody local which is the best one, you'll get a different answer every time.
Every time, yeah. Yeah, just don't go to Pattergino's because that's where everybody goes.
They are not delicious. But the Jersey Mike's absolutely the best.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the story, about Braden's Hope. Braden, of course, is your son, of which you have two. Of course, we can't forget about Zach because he's going to come into play here as well. Talk a little bit about this, and maybe for the people out there, if they're looking for signs or they're worried and I know you do all this, they call you the momcologist because you probably know more about childhood cancer than most doctors. A lot of the oncology doctors know a lot about adult cancer. But the childhood cancer thing sort of gets, second fiddle. And it is the leading cause of death in children is childhood cancer, and they just don't do enough about it. But talk about the Braden thing. He was born, and he's all of a sudden, you're going along fine. All of a sudden, he gets 3 years old.
So he's 3 years, just barely 2 months after he turned 3 years old, he started having, he was just not himself. He was just kind of lethargic. He was kind of it looked like some pain. He was crying a lot, and he was not a kid that cried. So we took him into the doctor, and after several times of taking him into the doctor, we actually finally got an x-ray, and the x-ray showed a small gray shadow, and he had low labs. So he had a blood transfusion, was in overnight, and they were like, probably it's just that shadow is just an enlarged liver due to a virus. Go home, do these iron drops. Took him repeatedly after that for 2 months. Finally, after 2 months, I was just done of taking him into a primary care. I took him into the emergency room. They did another x-ray, And that shadow was so large that it was pushing organs out of its way. And at that point, they were like, we're dealing with something pretty serious. And we found out that it was Stage IV Neuroblastoma, which is one type of childhood cancer.
Yeah, one of, I think there are a ton of childhood cancers in here. I know I have written down somewhere. And then there's another 100 that just branch off from those particular childhood cancers. And hearing neuroblastoma when you first, and Stage 4, of course, anytime you hear something like that, what were your first thoughts at that point?
Well, I think your first thoughts are always, they're wrong. This can't be real. There's got to be some mix-up in a file someplace. Right. It can't be, exactly, it can't be my child. And then that realization hits. I mean, for me, the realization hit the minute that we walked up onto the oncology floor. And well, we didn't walk. Braden was in his bed. We walked. Braden was in his bed. They pushed him up onto the floor. And I was so prepared for all of, bald heads and sick kids. Mm-hmm. And literally, as we were walking down the hallway, pushing his bed into his room, there was a little one that was on a tractor with a bald head on one of those push pedal tractors. Mm-hmm. And he was speeding, zooming down the hallway. His mom was chasing him as fast as she could, pushing the IV pole. And he's laughing and screaming. And I'm like, this place maybe isn't so terrible. There still is joy here. They're still kids. They're still just kids. And so that was kind of our indoctrination into it. And then we found out how bad the diagnosis was. We were told that he had about a 30% chance of survival over the next 5 years.
Yeah, right. And they didn't give you long-term survival, just over the next 5 years was about as long as they could push it out at that time, right? And so then what happened from that point? You started getting treatment, of course, and he's doing the chemo radiation. And the problem with all of this is, and I think this is for the Braden Hofen for childhood cancer and all the fundraising you're doing, these kids, these little kids, now we're talking about a 3-year-old here, and then the little kid going down the hall is probably 4, racing down the hall, is they are treating these kids with highly toxic chemo and radiation that's usually used on adults. And kids' systems just can't take it, can they?
Absolutely. That is very true. So what happens a lot of times with our kids is they inherit the drugs from the adult cancer world because there are so few pharmaceutical industries that are willing to put in any dollars into doing investigation into drug development for children. It's not as profitable. There aren't as many children who get cancer as there are adults. And that is such a horrible thing to say and such a horrible thing to live with, knowing that my kid didn't matter as much because there are fewer people his age. So we literally repurpose drugs for adults. We try to find the right dosage for these kids. They call it the Goldilocks effect, not too little to not do any good, not too much to actually kill the kiddo, and make it just right so that their systems can handle it. But our kids are largely getting 50, 60, and 70-year-old chemotherapies for standard of treatment, for gold standard of treatment. And those have, as you said, extremely toxic side effects, which is not good.
Yeah, right. And he did go in remission after the first diagnosis and the first set of treatments, right?
Yep. So we had about 1.5 years of treatment, and after that, and it was all high-dose chemo. We were inpatient for all of this. So we pretty much lived in the hospital for about a year, had a bone marrow transplant, and then at the end of that, he was in remission. But we were still doing, there was a trial that was open that he could qualify to go into. So we went in for scans to try to qualify that, and that's when we found that his cancer had returned, that it had relapsed.
Okay, so and then he's 5 years old at this point, right? And they said about 5 years, and at this point, he relapses, no known cure, 10% chance to live, okay? And you still plow on and keep on going, which I think basically anybody would. It's your child, so you're going to do as much as you possibly can, and just to go from there. So your mindset at that point?
Guarded.
Okay.
Guarded, but willing to try, willing to take those risks. So since there's no known cure in our minds, if there's no known cure for these children, let's try something that hasn't necessarily been done before. And so we started going to Philadelphia for treatment. So when you say Philly, that hits close to my heart. Exactly. Hits close to my heart. He's been getting treatment in Philly since he was 5 years old. And so literally we started doing some experimental kinds of therapies with him, and we got really, really lucky and got him into a second remission.
Yes, right. But at that time when he relapses, that's when you find out that you have breast cancer.
How crazy is that? So,
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, you have to go. I mean, come on.
There was literally a point, I'm very much a believer in God and very much a faithful woman, but there was a time that I was like, I am not going to ask what's next because I really am afraid there's going to be a horde of locusts, and I'm super afraid of locusts. So I don't think I'm going to even ask. So we did. We were literally getting ready to take him up to Philadelphia for that experimental treatment, and we knew we were going to be there for about 6 weeks at least. And so we were getting ready to go. I found a lump in my breast, went into my doctor, and she's like, okay, we know each other well enough. We'd been through a lot of stuff. And she's like, I'm not going to lie to you. This probably is cancer. Do you want to just go right now and get it imaged? And I said, I don't have time right now. It's going to have to wait until we get back.
I have something else more important.
Exactly. So we went to Philadelphia and did that treatment. And then when we got back in Kansas City is when I went in and started getting my stuff taken care of.
Okay, so you waited then for how long before you started?
It was probably about 4 to 6 weeks before I was able to, before I was even got the diagnosis.
Right.
So it was crazy.
Yeah, and I guess at one time the two of you were on. You're doing side by side treatments with one another. Oh my God!
Almost.
I can't even imagine.
It was insane.
Or on the same day, or
yeah, he was at
was.
Children's Mercy getting his treatments, and my husband would take him up to Children's Mercy to get his treatments, and I would be at KU Cancer Center getting my treatments for my cancer, and then come home, and then he was doing 5 days at a time. I only had to do 1 day, and literally he was like, "Let's go to the park, let's play with this," and I'm like, "Kind of just need a nap, but we're gonna get up and we're gonna go play because." Your odds are that bad. You're going to make the most you can of every minute that you get.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can't even imagine what's going through your mind at this time. And I think everybody also has to realize you have Zach at home.
Yes.
Dad's at home.
Yes.
I mean, how are you balancing the life situation?
I don't think, I think it's an impossible situation. It really is. And I can't say that we did justice to it. Complete justice to anybody. Brian stayed home with Zach and was with him that year that Braden and I were in the hospital. He was pretty much home with Zach, and they would come up to the hospital. I would get to see Zach. Zach and I started doing cooking lessons together to try to have something for us to do together. And eventually Zach would end up on the Food Network because he was doing cooking lessons, and people heard about it, and he was pretty good. So,
yeah.
but it was really hard. But the bonus that we had was we had a lot of friends that would step in, not just to help us as a family, but would say, hey, can we take Zach? We're going to go do this special thing at, Kaleidoscope or wherever it is they're going to go. Can we take Zach with us? And so Zach got to go to a lot of places that we wouldn't have been able to take if people hadn't just stepped up and made a difference.
Yeah. That's what friends are all about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's when you know who your friends are.
Absolutely.
Anyway, like at that point. So you two are going through this together. You both go into remission,
yes.
right? Still, there were daily treatments to keep the disease at bay, and then you turn around. That was like 2009 when all that happened. You find out you had MS too.
Well, I've had MS since 2000. So I've had MS for about 25 years now. So yeah, I mean, we just keep adding layers, Frank. We want to do as many layers deep as we possibly can. Apparently, I'm good with stopping.
Yeah, I know. Anytime if they want to do it. So. You go from 2009 to 2013, you think everything again is good, but I think anyone has had cancer or whatever, I know Sarah, my wife, has gone through it as well, is a situation where you're always in the back of your mind, you're fearful of it's going to come back. And I think even the doctors say that, okay? They always tell you, it's in remission, but there's always the but in there.
There always is. There always is. And it doesn't matter, this, it doesn't matter how many times they tell you, hey, we're in a good place right now. Your head is still programmed to every time you have a fever, every time something hurts, every time you slept a little longer than you really planned to. Anytime something is different, you're immediately like, oh, cancer's back. Cancer's back. So you're just programmed to be on constant watch.
Yeah. And the doctors are probably... They know, so they're on constant watch as well. So they're really helping there. And you can shout out. It was the Stowers Institute is helping, right? And the KU is it KU Cancer Center as well, correct?
Yeah, so KU, where Children's Mercy was where Braden was getting his
That was with
treatment.
Braden, yes. Children's
exactly.
Mercy Hospital,
And then
yes.
also at CHOP in Philadelphia, Children's Hospital in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And then we are working like research-wise. We work with KU and with Children's Mercy. And then Stowers has been involved on one of our grants that we've done too.
Yeah, and Stowers is every day.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've had them on as well. Every day they're working on things like this. You know, they're a research center. That's all they're doing is research, and they're trying to find not only cures for cancer or all these other diseases. They're even trying to figure out how to, regrow stem cells for people who are quadriplegic that have been hurt in automobile accidents or in the war or something like that. So you have a good group of people
Amazing.
working for you.
Yep.
So when did you come up with the idea to do something more, okay, besides just go through all this, is to form Braden's Hope for Childhood Cancer?
Well, I can't say that I necessarily came up with it. All of my friends were coming to me and saying, listen, we knew it wasn't okay. I had such great odds with my cancer, which was amazing, and I'm so grateful.
Again, an adult cancer.
Absolutely, and breast cancer. And so breast cancer gets a lot of research, and it's had a lot of work done in it to find cures. And so I was so fortunate that I had the right type of breast cancer, and I had a treatment plan that would work for me. Braden had, no known cure. We were throwing experimental things at it. And even after he was in remission, we were still continuing to keep him on maintenance therapy. So he was still continuing into therapy. But when I had my really good odds and Braden had his really poor odds, I started researching to find out why that discrepancy existed. And what I found out was how overlooked and underfunded childhood cancers were. And because of that, all of my friends were like, we can do something. And I'm like, I'm going through cancer treatment.
Would you go do something? I'm fine.
How are we going to make this happen? And they're like, we've got it. We will do it. And so literally this community of friends and this community in Kansas City came together and said, we have no idea what we're doing, but we want to start something to make a difference, to level that playing field for children so that they have the same things available to them that adults have.
Yeah, right. Just to give you an idea, folks, of the difference in funding, I think this was back in 2019 or 20, $30 million for childhood cancers across all spectrums, okay? $572 million alone for breast cancer. That's not anything else. That's just breast cancer. So $30 million for all childhood cancers and $572 million for just one. And that's where we get back to talking about the toxicity of the treatments that they're giving your children because they are adult treatments for cancer. So,
absolutely. And we know that about 96%, so virtually all of our children that go through cancer treatments end up with long-term health effects afterwards because of that toxicity, because they're getting 50, 60, and 70-year-old drugs. So when we started Braden's Hope, we wanted to make sure that the research that we were funding was research to find treatments that are less toxic, treatments that don't just attack all of the cells in your body, but go in to try to find those cancer cells and to try to find the pathway to shut those down. So basically, someplace along the way, there's a switch that flips that turns the cancer cells on. We want to turn that switch down so that it's turned off so that these kids have a chance at a life and a future.
Yeah, right. And just to let everyone know, Braden, still doing well. He's going to turn 21 here in 2025, which is phenomenal for a kid who was given every time he went back and went and lost his remission. He started having the cancer started to come back. He was given less and less of a chance to live because he had all these. And even he got the remission the second time, and then he ended up with leukemia.
Which is crazy.
Which is just, you just go, how does any of this happen? And how does he survive all this?
Well, for me, it's the grace of God. I mean, we were lucky that we had the right medical people in the right place at the right time. When they gave us the diagnosis, so he'd gone around in remission for a while, and then when he was 8, all of a sudden we have this secondary leukemia that got diagnosed. What they told us was that secondary leukemia was caused by the treatments that he'd had. They were so toxic that
the adult treatments.
Absolutely. They literally deleted one of the chromosomes in his DNA. Now, a treatment that is designed to save your life deletes a chromosome in your DNA that causes you to have another life-threatening illness, another life-threatening cancer. It was unthinkable to me. that could even happen. But here we were. And they said at that time, literally no child had survived relapsed neuroblastoma after this form of secondary leukemia. And so those were the odds that we were facing at that exact moment.
Yeah, and it's just, how is, he is, I mean, you alone, but you're a mom, okay? You're an adult, you're a mom, you're going to fight through this thing. It's my child. My breast cancer can wait 6 weeks. I don't care, the whole thing. But he is going through this from 3 years old on. How has he been able to handle all this himself? Not just physically, but mentally as well.
You know, I think that one thing that I learned, and the minute that I stepped onto that floor and almost got plowed over by a tractor, was that these kids are amazingly brave and courageous and resilient. It doesn't minimize what they're going through in any way, shape, or form, but their mindset is something that I have as a takeaway from this entire journey, is that if we can all just kind of frame it the same way these kids do, this is not fun, this is not enjoyable, this is horrible, this is not something that I want, but I got to go through it because the only way to is through. So I got to go through it, and they just put their heads down and they just plow through it. Yeah. And they are so positive about everything. And so many times I've been with moms as their children are dying, and these kids are just still amazingly, incredibly, somehow, still the toughest, most courageous people that I've ever met in my life. They just have a different mindset, a different way of looking at things.
And I think I've heard you say that he just thought this was normal for every kid his age.
He did.
I mean, everybody's going through this, not just me.
Yeah, well, and your mom's doing it too. So, of course, everybody probably goes to the hospital, and everybody has tubies, and everybody goes bald. So he just probably thought that's the way life was. Right. And he also has autism. And I think literally the autism was, I told you, we like layers, Frank. It's crazy. Oh, so he has autism, and because of that, they could have all the conversations in front of him, and I don't think he really understood exactly what it was.
They weren't talking about him.
And I don't think he doesn't get what cancer is or how sick he really was, and they could give us the odds, and he would just be like, "Hey, can we go play?" So it's amazing.
When are we getting out of here?
Exactly. Yeah.
So talk about the fundraising efforts. I think started in 2010. You had a big gala that year, and it ended up being maybe way more successful than you thought.
You know, it was amazing. So when we very first started our very first gala that we had, I'd never been to a gala in my life, never had attended one. And one of my friends was like,
Never got to dress up?
No. One of my friends was like, let's have a gala. And I'm like, how hard can it be? Because really all we have to do is show up. They're going to make dinner. They're going to do the dishes. Right. We invite some people, raise some money. It can't be that hard, right? So let's do it. We're in. So we did it not knowing. And that very first year, we had about 300 people that showed up, and we raised about $60,000, and we thought we had hung the moon. It was amazing. Such a celebration.
Yeah, right. And then it's just gotten more and more successful as you've gone along. I think in 2023, you raised over $1 million.
Yeah.
What did you do? Did you do it in 2024 as well?
We did, yeah. In 2024, we raised over $1 million as well. I think 2024 last year, we raised about 1.15.
Wow. Okay.
Which is incredible, and that just speaks to the hearts of the people in Kansas City that show up to make a difference for these kids.
And so then, where does the money go, and what exactly?
So the money actually goes into funding research studies. So we actually fund research studies that we vet out. We go through an RFA process. Where we go through a whole 2-stage review process with 2 different groups, a scientific review group and a research review council group, to make sure that the science is strong and valid and reliable, and also to make sure that it's a mission and vision and purpose match for Braden's Hope. So we take it pretty seriously. It's a pretty rigorous process to be able to get a grant from Braden's Hope. So
and so who helps you with all this?
So we're currently working with Children's Mercy Hospital and also KU Cancer Center, and then we're also looking at when we very first started, we were funding institutions that were the top 5 institutions in the United States nationwide. And so then we decided we don't have that many dollars that we can do really national research. So now we're looking at being able to go back and funding some national research in addition to the local research that we're doing, which is a pretty exciting thing to be able to broaden that.
Yeah, right. And what kind of successes have you seen?
Oh, it's amazing.
In this area.
Amazing. So Children's Mercy has been a really great partner with our research. And so what we've been able to do, and KU Cancer Center as well, some of our researchers are collaborating with between KU and Children's Mercy, which has been a really strong collaboration. We have one of our trials that we funded that actually is in a phase 1 study, which means that it's actually getting into patients' bedside, which is ultimately the goal of doing, the bench research that's happening in the lab. Ultimately, the goal is that it actually reaches the patients, and we have one that did that. 1 out of 1,000, I think, get into phase 1 studies. So it's a very difficult process to do that. So we're super excited about the things.
What criteria do they what hoops have to jump through to get through that?
Oh, there are so many hoops for them. And I don't even know that I can intelligently speak to that,
right.
Frank, but there's a whole process because once it leaves the bench work that they're doing, they have to go through the NIH for that phase 1 type
National
of
Institute
stuff.
of Health.
Exactly. And so they start funding big dollars in order to be able, like tens of millions of dollars in order to be able to do that. But it's quite a process.
Right. Well, it has to be because I think I have this stat here, and I think I'm at least close to right. Only 4 drugs to treat childhood cancer have been developed since 1980.
Which is crazy.
That is only 4 drugs.
Yeah, I think we might be up to 6 now, but literally 6 out of hundreds for adults, but only 6 for our kids for all cancers, not just one type of cancer. For all cancers.
In fact, they're doing 50 new drugs. They had 50 new drugs for adult cancer over that same period of time.
Oh yeah, probably even more, I'm betting. So it's amazing. It's amazing the discrepancy that exists. And again, it comes down to there are fewer children than there are adults.
Yeah.
And so I know that there's some legislation out there that's trying to kind of level that playing field, saying, hey, when you're developing a drug, we would at least just ask that you try to create a link to childhood cancers as you're developing those drugs. So hopefully that will help push us in more of a better direction.
You sort of have to bang on the door of Big Pharma. I mean, I'm not being political about this. I'm just being, realistic. You just see the cost of things as far as medicine's concerned, and I don't even want to begin to think of how much money could be spent. Braden's going to turn 21 this year. He's been doing this for 18 years. Okay. I mean, and then you went through it as well. But the cost from Big Pharma and getting passed on to the consumer and the person who really needs the help is you just can't continue to do this.
That is so true.
It just makes no sense.
So true. There are actually organizations that do that advocacy arm that actually go to D.C. and do all that legislative advocacy. We don't do that. We do research, but we are a part of a larger national organization that does have an arm that takes care of that. So we at least get to get informed on it and know things that are happening out there. But it definitely is a battle to try to get drugs made. And that's one of the cool things. That's one of our wins that we've had here in Kansas City is that KU has its own drug development center in Lawrence, which who knew that was a thing, but it is. And so there are only, I think, 6 institutions in the United States that have an institution and a drug development center. We're one of those, and I think that they are ranked either number 1 or number 2. Mm-hmm. So it's a really special place. So one of our studies that we've funded is to drug development for a KU compound to help with one particular type of childhood cancer. And it's going really, really well enough that they've been able to secure some additional NIH funding to be able to broaden that study out because of the seed funding that we placed into that study. So we are lucky here in Kansas City that we have that incredible resource that is willing to say kids matter. Yeah. And we're going to make a difference for the kids, so absolutely we'll work on that drug development.
Yeah, our hospital zone here in Kansas City is phenomenal.
It's amazing.
Children's Mercy is one of the best in the country, if not the world. Stowers Institute, they're number 1 in the world in doing research. KU Med Center, you have all sorts of other type situations, but it's amazing. And you say all the time, they say, well, there's nothing else we can do.
Yes.
And then you always say,
Well, what I used to say to the doctors, we probably can't repeat here.
Oh, sure you can. We're on podcast. You're fine. Say whatever you want.
what I literally said to one of the doctors one time, when he developed his secondary leukemia, was, I need you to turn the world upside down and shake it until something falls out, because we're not quitting. Mm-hmm. So that's literally what they did. And then one of our doctors here in Kansas City, everybody had given up hope. One of our doctors in Kansas City said, I might have something that might work. We could give it a go. And amazingly, it did work, got him into remission, and he's been in remission since then.
Yes.
And so there are institutions that are actually using the process and the drugs that we used for Braden with the secondary leukemia and other cases like Braden's. So It's been amazing.
And how much is he still going through treatment?
He is not.
Oh, he's not in any treatment at all?
He hasn't had any cancer treatment since he went through. So the cure for him was getting a bone marrow transplant when...
And this is where Zach comes into play.
This is where Zach comes into play. So
Son Zach.
They were like, the only way you can fix broken DNA is to get new DNA. And I'm like, that sounds complicated. And they said to do that, you have bone marrow transplant and you have a donor's cells. Does he have any siblings? And I'm like, well, he's got one. And they're like, it's very rare that a sibling isn't matched. But they did a test. And Zach happened to be a 10 out of 10 match.
And for once... It works your way, right?
Yes, amazingly, yes. So Zach was 10 at the time and bravely donated his bone marrow to his brother, and that has kept the cancer at bay, knocking on wood again.
Yeah, exactly.
Has kept his cancer at bay since then.
Yeah, wow. And so where is he and what is he doing now? And how are things with Braden? And we'll talk about Zach here in a minute as well.
Sure. So Braden is actually doing pretty well. He is cancer-free, like I said. He is suffering a lot of long-term health effects.
From the treatments, correct?
Very much so. Very much from the treatments. He's got several different organs that have difficulties and some secondary things that have happened as a direct result of the treatments that we had to give him to save his life. And when you're going through it, I mean, they always tell you when you're doing a trial or when you're doing drugs, they always tell you, listen, there's a risk here that something's going to happen down there. But if you don't do it, they die. And so my mom...
What is the risk?
Exactly.
You know what I
mean? My mom died from brain cancer. And my answer to doctors all of the time when they would say that is, I've seen death by cancer. It's ugly. It's horrible. It's miserable. So either way we go here, at least we have a fighting chance. At least we get to have hope if we try that. And so we would try it. And we just happened to get really, really lucky. So as much as it sounds like our story has all of these devastating layers to it.
And it does.
We have always been fortunate enough to end up on the lucky side of things. And I think that gift maybe makes me feel like we're a little bit more required to try to make a bigger difference for others so that they don't have children that die from cancer. And in honor of all of the kids that I know and the families that I know that have had to put their children in graves, it's not okay. Yeah,
you said a lot of time when you were with Braden early on, the one thing that you say is, a lot of parents walk out of those hospitals without their kids.
Absolutely, they do. Empty arms. You walk in the door, and you're filled with hope, and you think everything is going to be okay, and it just takes 1 minute for something to go wrong. And it could be a reaction to a drug. It could be the cancer doesn't react to the therapy, and it just takes them over. And then they're walking out the door without their children, and it's just devastating.
Yeah, really. And the other thing with Braden, too, knowing and even talking to him about it, is the fact that what you're doing may help somebody else become like you and be able to live in remission and have a life, at least to a certain point, and just, be able to go from there, still be with your mom and dad and your brother and
absolutely
the whole thing, right?
Every day that I get to hear him say, I love you, is just the biggest gift ever. Nothing else matters.
And how's Zach? And what is Zach doing these days?
He's doing great. So Zach is now 21. So they're only 17 months apart.
Yeah,
so that's why they just seem so close, because they are. So Zach is now going to Johnson County Community College. He's doing a major in auto tech, and then he's working part-time. So,
okay, good.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah.
And how about Dad?
Dad's doing well. Doing well.
Are you sure?
Last time I checked.
I'll tell you what, you talk about, I know how tough you are. They call you a momcologist, and you won the Perseverance Award back in 2015, which well-deserved. You should probably win it every year. You've won lots of honors and awards and stuff, but he was also going through the same thing, and he was going through it with you and with his son and with his other son. You know, the whole thing is just it's been an amazing family unit for you guys, and I think that's maybe the only way you've been overcome a lot of this, right?
It really is true. It really is true. And I will say that one of the things that we're really lucky with Brian, who's dad, is that he is an engineer, and so he's got that analytical mindset.
Yeah. Dot I's and cross T's
exactly, which has been really, really helpful and beneficial in so many ways.
Yeah.
So when I'm losing my mind, he is the calm in the storm that can be like, stop.
Yeah.
Let's regather and let's go from there.
Yeah, sure. So as a family, what do you guys do now since you know you've had all this stuff and you know there's a lot, you'd like to get a lot of life in.
Absolutely.
Okay, you know, daily, on a daily basis. What is the daily routine?
I tell you what, the cool thing that we learned during all of this, and it was kind of a pivotal moment for us, is there was one night when we were in the hospital at Children's Mercy. It was like 10 o'clock at night, and he finished up with the treatment, and they're like, you can stay all night or you can go home if you want to. And I'm like, we're going home, because we didn't get to go home very often.
Yeah.
So we're going home. So at that point, I really didn't know downtown very well. And it was very early in his treatment. And so when we left the hospital, there was a detour. And the detour took us down through Crown Center, which was lit up for all the Christmas stuff at that time. And Braden in the backseat of the car was just going nuts, just screaming and clapping because of all the beautiful lights and the pretty water. He was so excited. So I literally just did a few laps around the road in front of Crown Center. It's late at night. Nobody's there, right? Probably not getting arrested. It's okay. Turn around several different laps, and he's just so happy. And I'm crying and laughing and clapping. And I look over because I see movement, and there's a bus stop. There's a bus stop right down there at Crown Center that I didn't know about that people were waiting at, watching us turn all of these circles around. I'm like, oh,
they're waiting for you to do those. What do they call those things?
Exactly.
They're starting for your tires to smoke, right?
I should have done it.
You should. Nobody there to hit.
At that point, I'm like, oh my gosh, they know now how crazy I am. And so literally from that moment, we started adopting the mindset of taking detours. And so every time we get a chance to take a detour and try something that is, and Braden is the first one to point out something of interest or beautiful, we stop. And we take a few minutes and we actually enjoy that. When we would come to train stops, Braden loved trains, would see the train coming and I'd try and get across and he'd be so sad that we didn't. So we'd turn around and go wait in the line for the train to go.
Going the opposite way.
I'm like, something is not quite right. But it brought him joy. So literally just trying to do any detour that we could, that could bring us joy, has kind of been a family mantra.
Yeah, right. There must be something about trains because I have an autistic grandchild as well, Jameson, one of my grandsons, and he loves trains. Yeah. I mean, he'll sit there and watch the trains on YouTube. You know, he'll get on YouTube and go, "Wow," and just watch train after train after train going through the stops and the whole thing. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't know what that is. What else does he enjoy doing?
So Braden actually, he loves YouTube. He's very much into the police. So Braden would love to be a police officer at some point, and I'll tell you that the SROs that were at his school took such great care of him. Sometimes he'd go AWOL from class, and they'd know he's down at the SRO.
He's
hanging out.
He's gone. Where'd he go?
He's at the SRO. You're fine. Yeah, right. So he has a bike. It's an electric assist bike that has 3 wheels on it. And so when the weather is warm, he puts on his police uniform, and he has on lights on his bike, and we go bike patrolling the neighborhood, and he picks up the sticks that are in the sidewalk, and he stops and brings the traffic through the corners to make sure everybody goes through safely. So
that's awesome.
He has his little report notebook also, so you don't want to get caught on that side of it because that's not good. And we have neighbors that play along that pretend, tase, and arrest them, and it's awesome. It's awesome.
That is great. He sounds like he could be the president of the HOA. Okay.
Until he tases somebody.
I think I've seen guys like him. Okay, out there. So that is absolutely true. Is he a sports guy? Does he like the Chiefs and the Royals and the sporting and all those people, yeah?
He does. He really loves the Chiefs and the Royals and Sporting. He really does. So there was a time when we were doing calendars with the kids with the Chiefs, the Royals, and Sporting. We put 12 kids with 12 athletes. This was before COVID when everything changed in the world and we had to be separate. But those guys have always been so good with our kids. So he feels like they're home. So when we go to those places, they're just home to him. He calls the K Slugger's house because so excited that Slugger is going to be there. In fact, there was one time we were shooting the cover for the Royals calendar. He's out on the field with George Brett. You're not supposed to be on the field, as you know. You're not supposed to be on the field. And as soon as George Brett took him out on the field, I'm like, oh, no. And they're like, no, George can take him on the field.
George can do whatever he wants.
It's okay. So George takes him out on the field. They're playing, and Braden sees Slugger walking up. He's teaching Braden how to hit a ball with a bat.
This is George Brett, by the way.
And so teaching Braden how. Braden throws the bat down, ditches George Brett, and goes running straight for Slugger. And I'm like, oh, boy. And George was so awesome. He's like, yeah, Slugger, this is awesome. And I'm like, oh, so they are very much home for us, very much home for us.
Yeah.
All of those organizations are. So he loves sports. He likes to play basketball. That's been harder for him with some of his health side effects.
Yeah, sure.
He hasn't been able to do that as much, but he loves to play basketball.
Yeah, you bet. And so when you go on vacation, where do you go? Like, what do you do?
Braden loves the mountains. He's really
Sounds
drawn
like Colorado's
to it.
in
So Colorado we go, and so this last summer we went to Montana, and so he requires some oxygen when he's doing exercise, and so we have a little wheelchair for him, and so we push him around in the wheelchair when he needs to take a break, and he walks when he can walk, and kind of go from there. But he is so in love with nature. So anything we can do that's an outside kind of thing makes him happy.
Gosh, that's great. And there's so much up there to do.
Yes, it's beautiful. I'd not been to Montana. It was gorgeous.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful place. So the future for Braden's Hope is great.
Yes.
Okay, to just keep on going. And Braden sounds like he's doing great. Zach sounds like he's going great. Shout out to you, Zach, for the bone marrow, which I know is not an easy process. Of course, Brian, your husband. And we just really love having you here. And what is it about this city that, the name, of course, there's just something about Kansas City. Obviously, through the whole conversation, you could just get a feel for what it's like here and what the neighbors and the community have been and how much help they've been to you and your family. So.
There's something special about our city, and it's really hard to put into words. It's such a heart feel. I'm an educator by nature. I didn't know the first thing.
Former principal and teacher, right?
And former director of HR, Blue Valley. It was great. I loved education. Never saw myself doing anything different. And so when we decided we wanted to create this nonprofit and make a difference for all kids that have cancer, I didn't know what I was doing in any way, shape, or form. But people in the area did. And so literally I would just go sit with people and say, I don't know what I'm doing. Tell me how we build this. How do we do this? And people helped. And I didn't even really have to ask for help. I'd go in to learn, and they'd say, yeah, we can help you with that piece. We can help you with that piece. And so literally this organization was built like a puzzle with people in the community bringing a piece of the puzzle together to make the whole great, big, beautiful picture to help these kids. And I'm sure that other places are heartfelt like Kansas City is,
no,
but
they're not.
I don't think they are either. I really think we are so special in that people are just willing to selflessly give what I think is your most greatest treasure, which is your time. So willing to selflessly give your time to make a difference, to build something that they believe can help these children. And, one of the things that's been really hard for childhood cancer is there's such a lack of funding for the research, but there's also just a lack of awareness that there is such a big discrepancy for these kids. And as soon as the people in Kansas City heard about that difference, they were like, oh, that's not okay. Let's make a difference, and jumped right in. So this city is just so special. The people inside of it are so willing to do whatever it takes. I've always said, there was a point in our therapy that I was like, why is somebody not doing something for these kids? How can this be? And then I realized, oh, I'm somebody.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I guess we could do that. And so literally my friend said, we're somebody too. And then we started reaching out. And Kansas City's just filled with all of these somebodies who bring those puzzle pieces in to put it together, to build it, to make it a really impactful, beautiful thing for these children.
Yeah. And it is a community too, I think, more than, it's not just a city. where you've got this factions over here, and they need funding for this. Then all of a sudden they see this and they go, no, we're just going to do this.
True.
And we'll all come together and do it, and then we'll work on those, and we'll do those as well. And I think we're probably one of the most philanthropic cities in the entire country. So
I think so.
I think that's
amazing.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on
Well,
all you're doing, and God bless you. God bless Braden. God bless Zach and Brian, and just continued good work. And we'll keep an eye on it, and just keep pounding on Big Pharma's door. And I think they might finally wake up and say, you know what? I think we should really help those kids because they're our future.
True story. They are.
It really is. So. Yeah. Deliece, thank you so much. Deliece
Thank
Hofen,
you.
of course. Braden's Hope for Childhood Cancer, doing tremendous work here in Kansas City. That's why we always say there's just something about Kansas City.
There's Just Something About Kansas City is a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization with the mission of documenting the stories that have built our city to inspire and educate generations to come. Our work is made possible by the generous support of local partners such as the Cockrell Family Foundation, the Bergman family, and the Sherman Family Foundation. For more information about how you can help us share these stories, visit our website at somethingaboutKC.org. Thank you.